There's a show so realistic that its producer was gunned down in broad daylight. The crew wanted to keep filming but had to pay $14 million in licensing fees. Fortunately, in 2018, it finally aired. Now, let's see how the man known as Padre Miguel rose from an unknown cop to the peak of power. In the 1980s, Mexico was called the paradise of narcotics. Almost every corner grew plants used to produce cocaine. Even a young girl could sniff a leaf and tell exactly how long before it was ready to harvest. To wipe out drug operations, the Mexican government sent a large military force to Sinaloa to burn the crops and arrest traffickers. One fugitive, Rafa, found himself cornered and fled into a church. The commander outside warned through a loudspeaker, if Rafa wasn't handed over, they would use heavy weapons to storm in. Just then, a car slowly pulled into the churchyard. The officer who stepped out was none other than our main character, Miguel. Claiming there were women and children inside, he convinced the commander to give him some time, then personally went in to bring Rafa out. Moments later, Miguel emerged with Rafa in custody. When threatened, Rafa revealed the location of the largest nearby drug plantation. The commander immediately took his men to raid the place, leaving Rafa for Miguel to deal with. Miguel drove Rafa home and unlocked his cuffs. They were close friends. Miguel's actions were to protect him. From this large-scale operation, Miguel saw an opportunity. The more chaos, the better for small-time players like them. With big ambitions and no desire for an ordinary life, he went to the mayor, resigned from the police force, and plunged into the heroin trade, determined to live a life with no regrets. From that moment, drug lord Miguel began writing his own legend. But at the time, he had neither money nor manpower. He joined forces with the biggest trafficker in Sinaloa, Aviles. Government crackdowns put Aviles in danger. He called his men to find a solution, but no one had a solid plan. Watching from the sidelines, Miguel saw his chance and suggested expanding south. He explained. The north was barren and poor, with few officials or wealthy families, meaning the army could operate freely without fear of political fallout. The south, however, was home to the rich and high-ranking government officials, so the army couldn't just storm in. Though the idea wasn't bad, Aviles pointed out that the south belonged to the Naranjo brothers, implying he didn't want a turf war. Miguel kept flattering him, but Aviles wasn't fooled. Instead, he said, if you talk so well, you go negotiate. Miguel agreed, on the condition that he could bring the cartel's advisor, Netu. Reluctantly, Netu tagged along. On the road to Guadalajara, Netu stayed cooperative, convinced no one would share their slice of the pie with another cartel. Miguel didn't mind, he already had a plan. He would later be compared to Pablo Escobar, the man who created Mexico's first major trafficking route, earning the nickname the Godfather of Heroin, but at this point, he was just a nobody from the countryside. The man across the table, with a mushroom-shaped haircut, looked down on Miguel, mocking him as unworthy of any deal. Miguel didn't waste words. He pulled out a gun and shot him dead. His ruthless nature as a future kingpin was already on full display. Terrified, Netu called him insane. Killing the Naranjo's younger brother on their own turf was suicide. He left Miguel behind and fled. But Miguel wasn't afraid. He calmly sat drinking tea, waiting for the police to arrest him. His confidence came from a trump card that could shake the entire global cocaine trade, and as expected, Netu didn't get far before he was caught and brought back. These federal police officers were also protectors for the cartels. They planned to hand Miguel and Netu over to the Naranjo brothers. On the way, Miguel quietly told the lead officer that he had once saved the life of his superior's younger brother. The officer looked back, hesitated, and finally decided to take Miguel to meet his boss. This is the man who saved your younger brother in Sinaloa. I don't have a younger brother, you idiot. Miguel went straight to the point. He pulled from his pocket a finished product grown by Rafa, explaining that their product was not only pure but also compact. That meant the same vehicle could transport much more. Both quality and efficiency were several times higher than normal shipments. If the police chief agreed to work with him, Miguel would split the profits 50-50. It turned out Miguel never intended to work directly with Naranjo. He aimed to solve the problem at the root, work under the protection of the police. Tempted by the offer, the chief agreed. When Naranjo arrived, "This bastard killed my brother. Sorry, but I have to protect my partner." Without hesitation, the chief shot Naranjo dead and handed his territory over to Miguel, exactly as Miguel had planned. At this point, Miguel understood the rules of the drug game better than anyone. With police backing, he had taken the first step toward dominance. The second step was something no one had dared before, uniting all the drug-growing and trafficking gangs across Mexico into the largest cartel ever formed. In the 1980s, this was nearly impossible. The gangs distrusted each other, operating independently. not fighting was already a blessing, let alone cooperating. But Miguel knew the balancing point: profit. No one turns down money. With his boldness, high-quality supply, and the promise of massive profits from controlling the market and setting prices, Miguel quickly persuaded the gangs. They met in a hotel to discuss details, with federal police even inviting the head of the Federal Security Directorate to protect Miguel's alliance. Once most of the details were set, one cartel boss raised a glass. "I want to toast the man who made this possible, who brought us all together. Cheers." This embarrassed Avilés, who had been ready to stand up and take credit. Miguel quickly claimed the idea was Avilés's. But Avilés, short-sighted and emotional, immediately declared the alliance dissolved. Seeing Avilés act like a child, the other bosses left one by one, and all of Miguel's efforts went down the drain. Avilés grabbed Miguel's arm. "Come back to Sinaloa with me tonight, city life isn't for you." Miguel felt bitter but mostly unwilling to accept defeat. The plan was nearly complete, and now it was ruined over a single banquet. Neto whispered that if Miguel gave the word, he would shoot Avilés. After seeing everything Miguel had done, Neto knew he was a man who could achieve great things. Rather than support a useless leader, Neto preferred to help Miguel build an empire. But Miguel knew his position, like Liu Bei trying to seize Sichuan without a reputation, so he obediently followed Avilés. Not far down the road, a police car blocked their way. Neto arrived with the head of the Federal Security Directorate. "What's going on, Neto?" The chief signaled his men to open fire, killing Avilés and his crew. He recognized Miguel's intelligence and wanted to benefit from the alliance, so he helped eliminate Avilés. This allowed Miguel to take the top position in the alliance without opposition, marking the start of his legendary career. He became the first in Mexico's history to form a unified drug cartel, earning the nickname Rockefeller of Cocaine, with weekly earnings reaching $30 million. With nowhere left to stash his money, Miguel bought out all the local banks. When the banks couldn't hold it all, he purchased massive amounts of real estate, cars, and airplanes. Even then, the cash kept piling up, so he opened an account in the US and hired financial experts to spend it for him. Over time, the major factions in the alliance grew rich, but not everyone was happy, especially Nava, head of the Federal Directorate and their protector. The cartel bosses feasted, yet they wouldn't even give him a sip of soup. "What's this?" "The leftovers they tossed us." Sinaloans, greedy. So Nava decided to teach Miguel a lesson, to remind him who was really in charge. One night, the Molina family, cartel members, were hosting a party when a squad of plainclothes officers stormed in, killing everyone. Why? The leftovers. The Felix brothers, relatives of the Molinas, were furious and vowed to shoot it out with the police for revenge. As head of the alliance, Miguel was caught in a bind. Their business needed police protection, and a split would tear the group apart. But Nava had gone too far, and Miguel needed to give the Felix brothers a satisfactory answer or risk losing the others' trust, and with it, his empire. While Miguel was trying to balance the two sides, Nava struck first. He had Miguel's car stopped and forced him into his own vehicle. Nava pulled out a file proving Miguel's past as a cop, as if to say, "In front of me, you have no secrets, cross me, and I can have you killed anytime." Nava then asked Miguel for a favor: in a few days, help move some things to another location. Then he drove off. Fuming, Miguel knew he had to strike back and find Nava's weakness. Not knowing much about politics, he went to his former boss, the mayor of Sinaloa, a man who was like a teacher and father to him, and explained everything. As the saying goes, the older the ginger, the spicier it gets. After hearing the story, the mayor quickly devised a plan. Behind Nava were many people waiting for their cut. With just a hint, Miguel understood. He hosted a banquet, inviting both Nava and the Felix brothers to settle their dispute. This time, Miguel was confident, not timid like in the car, because he had already set up an ambush for Nava's men, handing them over to the Felix brothers. "There are things you need to understand. We make the money. You make sure no one causes trouble. But if you want, we can go our separate ways. Then you can explain to your superiors yourself." Though furious, Nava had no choice but to comply, forcing a smile and bowing to Miguel. The immediate danger was over. But Miguel didn't know a hitman had infiltrated his plantations, someone who would destroy his empire. In the 1980s, the Mexican drug world had an unspoken rule: never kill an American FBI agent. Being outsiders, U.S. agents were largely ignored, with local authorities looking the other way. That was until an agent named Kiki arrived, shattering the delicate balance. Kiki was an incorruptible DEA agent, but poor at navigating workplace politics. In the U.S. agency, he was never given a chance to prove himself. Frustrated, he requested a transfer to Mexico, a place teeming with criminals. He thought he'd be free to act there, but reality hit him hard. On his first mission with his superior, Jamie, everything went too smoothly. The criminals offered no resistance, as if it were a rehearsal. Confused, Kiki was told by Jamie about the local rules. What we have to do is protect ourselves. Protect ourselves. Kiki didn't agree, feeling ashamed to work alongside such people, and decided to investigate on his own. Before long, he targeted a warehouse belonging to a drug crew. Spotting a truck leaving, he tailed it in secret. It led to a site on the outskirts of town, filled with migrant workers looking for jobs. A while later, an armed crew arrived in a truck, handing out hoods for every worker. Kiki blended in and boarded the truck with the others. Security was tight, all workers were hooded before being driven to their destination. By the next morning, the convoy arrived at a massive coca plantation. As Kiki stepped off, he froze at the sight of endless coca fields. We're assigned to the northern section. Good God, what he was seeing was just the tip of the iceberg. How big was the whole operation? When Kiki asked how large the plantation was, the man beside him paused, then said, "We've never seen the end of it." At night, the crew returned the workers to the outskirts, paying them in full. The next morning, Kiki reported everything to Jamie. Though Jaime's philosophy was protect yourself first, the sheer scale of the crop made him take notice. Jamie went to the U.S. Embassy in Mexico, hoping they'd pressure the government for support, but embassy officials argued that the drug trade couldn't be wiped out completely, and if one cartel controlled the market, overall crime might actually decrease. If there's a cartel like this, I can live with that. Jamie and Kiki couldn't believe it. They decided to investigate quietly, but every move was blocked by the Mexican security agency. Slashed tires, direct interference, anything to stop them from tailing Miguel. So they shifted focus to other cartel leaders, one of them being Rafa, Miguel's right-hand man. At a lavish party, Rafa met Sofia, the love of his life. He asked her to dance, provoking her boyfriend, who pulled her into the ballroom to stake his claim. Yet every few steps, Sofia glanced back at Rafa. He caught the meaning in her eyes. Rafa waited patiently outside in a quiet spot. Before long, Sofia came out and they spent the night together. By Christmas, Sofia's family was hosting a party when two gunmen burst in. Her father barked, "Do you know who I am?" One gunman shoved him aside while the other went for Sofia. Her boyfriend started to defend her, but the moment he saw the gun, he cowered, dropping to his knees and letting the gunman take her. Her father gave chase but could only watch the car speed away. Once they were clear, Sofia laughed. It had all been her and Rafa's plan. But the stunt had serious consequences. The police chief informed Miguel that Sofia's father was a government minister. Realizing the gravity, Miguel rushed to Rafa, urging him to surrender to the police. Rafa didn't get it. It's just a small kidnapping. Miguel was furious. Sofia's father had mobilized armed forces to kill Rafa, putting the entire alliance at risk. Frustrated but loyal, Miguel told Rafa to pack and flee until the heat died down. Miguel then went to Nava, humbling himself and promising to be obedient if Nava would protect Rafa. "Tell your boss about this, I'll help." Meanwhile, Kiki saw an opening and went to the police station, hoping to use the case to dismantle the alliance. Under pressure from higher-ups, the police worked quickly, locating Rafa that very night. But just then, the commander received the order to pull out. On the way home, Kiki was furious, yelling at the commander for an explanation. "They're high-ranking officials. If we go up against them, we're dead. There's no way to fight back." Meanwhile, for Rafa's sake, Miguel personally delivered a shipment for the chief, but as soon as the plane landed, a squad of soldiers surrounded them. Miguel presented papers provided by Nava, but after a glance, the soldiers hooded him. In a dark warehouse, Miguel was hung from the ceiling and brutally tortured. The commander demanded to know who sent him. Miguel named Nava again, but the man had no idea who that was and kept beating him. Just then, a man walked in, ordered the soldiers to stop, and freed Miguel. It turned out Nava didn't trust Miguel to follow orders and had used the shipment as an excuse to teach him a lesson. Though physically battered, Miguel spotted a massive money-making opportunity, one that could put him on equal footing with the king of cocaine himself, Pablo Escobar. Not long before, when he was captured and tied up at the military base, Miguel had noticed a huge stash of narcotics stored there. With his sharp mind, he immediately saw the potential. He reached out to his close friend Isabella to arrange a meeting with Mata, Colombia's top air cargo trafficker. Miguel knew Mata's clients were seeking a new partner, so he aimed to break into Colombia's transport network. But Mata was unimpressed, seeing powder cocaine as too crude compared to synthetic drugs. "Do you have the political clout to pull this off?" Miguel assured him he could handle it smoothly, and with Isabella's backing, Mata pressed him once more. "If I hand Colombia's shipments to you, You take full responsibility. If anything goes missing, the consequences will be severe. Seeing Miguel's resolve, Mata introduced him to the two major cartels, Cali and Medellin. After weighing the pros and cons, Miguel chose Cali. Under Mata's arrangements, Miguel soon met Cali's boss. The man didn't give him a hard time. Impressed by his complete transport network and large capacity, the deal was struck quickly. But as Miguel and Isabella prepared to board their flight home, two large men stepped out of a taxi and violently forced them into the vehicle. By nightfall, Miguel was brought to a deserted garden. Out of the shadows emerged Pablo Escobar himself, asking why Miguel had chosen Cali. Miguel's honesty surprised Pablo. Wasn't he afraid of dying? If you wanted to kill me, I'd already be dead on the road. Pablo appreciated his composure and began speaking as a friend. He asked why Miguel would leave cocaine, a huge moneymaker that would soon be legalized, for heroin. Miguel took a deep breath and shared the story of his first wife, who died of leukemia. That was when he realized, only by becoming powerful enough to control the world could he protect his loved ones and get what he wanted. Pablo, having faced similar loss, understood. He agreed to work with Miguel. You move a shipment for them, you move a shipment for me. Half for Cali. Half for me. If anything happens, make sure Cali takes the loss. Miguel's position left him no choice but to accept, marking a new high point in his career. While the traffickers were unloading goods into a warehouse, a large unit of soldiers stormed in, forcing them to surrender. A military armored vehicle rolled in, and out stepped Falcon, the most powerful man in Tijuana, in charge of all drug trade there and with the power to command the army. Falcon and Miguel's alliance had always kept out of each other's way. But Miguel's deals with Cali and Medellin threatened his profits, so Falcon struck first, banning Miguel from operating in his territory and firing a rocket as a show of force before leaving. Afterward, Falcon called Rafa, trying to lure him into working together, saying Miguel was new to the heroin trade and Rafa's status would inevitably drop. Rafa smashed the phone in anger and told Netu, who immediately realized how serious the matter was and rushed Rafa to meet Miguel. These hands can grow the best coca in the world. But we know nothing about heroin. Netu stayed silent, knowing Miguel wasn't reckless, and waited for his explanation. Mexico is about to become the only route to bring heroin into the US. That's the market. That's our future. Do you want to be left behind by the times? As the man who produced the world's finest cocaine, Rafa couldn't stand seeing his life's work abandoned, but Miguel had made up his mind. Netu, as the alliance's strategist, sided with Miguel. 2 votes to 1, Rafa left in frustration. Netu then informed Miguel about Falcon and promised to handle it so he could focus on heroin. But Netu didn't know Miguel was dangerously ambitious. Even after dealing with Colombia's 2 drug lords, he still lacked political protection. Miguel used his ties with them to approach top government officials. The matter was so sensitive that the officials needed time to decide. But Miguel was running out of time. The shipment was due next week, and if it didn't get into the US, he was as good as dead. Meanwhile, Netu bribed all the police in Tijuana, ordering them to storm Falcon's warehouse, steal back the goods, and burn the place down. Miguel stayed in his office, waiting for word from the high-ranking official. When a call finally came, it was from his U.S. financial advisor. The advisor told him to come to the U.S. immediately to sign asset transfer papers, or his accounts would be frozen. With no choice, Miguel agreed. He didn't know the advisor had been flipped by the police. This was Kiki's trap. Kiki set up a massive net at the border checkpoint. Soon, they spotted Miguel in disguise. Just as he was about to cross, U.S. border police stopped him and handed him a phone. On the line was the government official he'd been waiting for. The man agreed to work with Miguel and gave him 2 major gifts. First, a warning that U.S. police were lying in wait ahead. Second, a promise to take care of Falcon. Miguel had won this gamble. With government backing, his operations ran smoothly, free of obstacles. He became Mexico's godfather of heroin, the first to create a unified cartel alliance. His transportation network was called the world's fastest white powder express, with even Pablo Escobar relying on him for shipments. Since shifting from growing coca to moving heroin, Miguel's wealth and power skyrocketed, but at a cost. With everyone focused on heroin, Rafa's coca rotted in the fields. Rafa stormed in, furious. My top-grade coca is the reason you have your position today. Without it, none of this would exist. You think I don't know? But with heroin profits far exceeding cocaine, Miguel had no reason to go back. The two parted on bad terms. Meanwhile, Miguel's wife also asked for a divorce. Once, he had been a good husband who listened to her advice and cared for his family. But wealth had changed him. The saying men with money go bad proved true. Originally, he wanted to earn enough to give his loved ones a better life. but as his business grew, he forgot that goal. Even with more money than he could spend, he risked everything in the heroin trade, and secretly cheated, getting another woman pregnant. Finally, his wife couldn't take it anymore and demanded a divorce. Miguel panicked, saying he would change. "I want to make it right. Then come back home with me." To appease his wife, Miguel reluctantly agreed to give it all up, but did he truly mean it? In the days that followed, he was like a ghost, often sitting alone in a daze. In the end, Miguel chose his empire. He called a meeting of the cartel's core members, announcing they would stop growing coca and shift all resources to heroin. "Anyone who doesn't support me can get out." Rafa slammed the table in anger, but Miguel remained firm. Rafa could only smirk bitterly and walk away. Later, Miguel told his wife he didn't need her anymore. Shocked, she collapsed into a chair, unable to believe his cruelty. As Miguel was leaving the hotel, Nava confronted him, demanding a bigger cut of the protection money. Miguel, in a foul mood, said they'd talk in a few days. Nava cursed at him. Having tolerated Nava long enough, Miguel snapped. If Nava wanted to die, he would oblige. It may have been impulsive, but with Miguel's current power, taking out the head of security was effortless. Meanwhile, two small-time cops, Jamie and Kiki, were plotting to bring the kingpin down. They approached a former Air Force colleague, convincing him to photograph the coca fields from the air. With the photos in hand, they went to U.S. Embassy officials to request a military strike, but were rejected. Kiki protested and was thrown out of the meeting. Jamie threatened the officials. If they didn't act, he'd leak the photos to the press. With no choice, they agreed. The next morning, armed helicopters swarmed over the coca plantation, packed with heavily armed soldiers. On the ground, cartel gunmen fought desperately. Rafa grabbed an AK from his men and led the fight, but the trained military quickly overwhelmed them. Unwilling to give up, Rafa fought until his ammo was gone, then used his rifle as a club, killing soldiers in close combat, grabbing an M4, and firing from higher ground. Still, the army's numbers and training were too much. Rafa retreated into the fields, but soldiers in off-road vehicles pursued. At the last moment, two of Rafa's most trusted men arrived. One stayed behind to cover, the other helped Rafa escape. The operation ended in a decisive military victory. Staring at the vast fields, a U.S. Embassy official was stunned. How could they grow this much? The coca plants were cut and burned. The smoke alone was enough to intoxicate locals. Reports estimated the destroyed crop's value at $2.5 billion. With the most advanced farming equipment of the 1980s. When news reached Miguel, he was unfazed, treating it as a gift to give officials something to brag about. But the public uproar forced his protector to meet privately, demanding that Miguel kill Kiki. Miguel wasn't stupid. They've already reassigned some agents. We need to handle this quietly, keep things calm. Seeing Miguel's hesitation, his protector stormed off. Meanwhile, the U.S. sent two agents to investigate. Kiki and Jamie handed over all their intelligence. Despite the secrecy, word reached Miguel's backers. The new head of security, El Azul, approached Rafa, offering to help him take care of Kiki. Simple-minded, Rafa agreed, ordering Kiki's abduction in broad daylight. When Miguel found out, he rushed to Rafa, demanding Kiki's release. He knew the government planned to use Rafa to kill the agent, then hand him over to U.S. authorities to calm tensions. As Miguel gave the order to free Kiki, his protector appeared, stressing the agent's importance. He wanted Miguel to extract information from Kiki, and warned that if he let him go, their partnership was over. Miguel had no choice but to comply, a compromise that would bring him catastrophic consequences. Kiki, a USDA agent, was kidnapped by the cartel. Jamie rushed to the local police for help, but they passed the case to the city police. At the city police, they demanded a prosecutor's signature. Jamie ordered his men to contact the prosecutor and secure a search warrant. With it in hand, he hurried to the police chief's office, only to be told no missing person had been reported and he'd need to file a report at the station. Furious, he shouted, "Call them right now. Afraid it's already too late. Come back tomorrow." Jamie had underestimated the rot in Mexico's government. Law enforcement was completely bought off by the cartels. When the deal learned of this, they sent all available agents to assist Jamie, bringing the most advanced wiretap equipment of the time to monitor the cartel's every move. Kiki's wife refused to wait idly. She confronted the official liaising with Mexico's leadership, furiously criticizing his inaction. "I understand how you feel. You don't understand a damn thing," she shot back. Under mounting pressure, he reluctantly promised to find a specialist to arrest Rafa. Meanwhile, Miguel got intel that the U.S. had deployed a large team of agents. Rafa was as good as dead. Not willing to watch his longtime brother walk to his death, Miguel gave Rafa money and told him to leave the country. Miguel then met with El Azul, ordering, Do not touch Kiki. Before leaving, Rafa intercepted Sofia's car. I miss you. I have to leave for a while, come with me. Of course, Sofia agreed to run away with him. But the DIA intercepted their escape plan via wiretap and alerted Jamie and the government-appointed commander. They raced to the airport, stopping Rafa moments before departure. Rafa raised his gold-plated pistol, ready for a shootout, but the commander stepped in, calling for negotiations. After a quick pat-down, he and Rafa boarded the plane to talk.
$1,000,000. Hoy no hay mordidas. Te las pones. Y esto acaba por las buenas.
Soon after, the commander got a phone call and told Jamie they had the wrong man. That's Rafa on that plane. Jamie shouted. The commander insisted it wasn't, claiming it was a DIA agent with proper ID. It was a blatant lie. The corruption of Mexico's government surpassed anything Jamie could imagine. The operation ended in humiliating failure. Rafa strutted away, mocking them. Kiki's wife kept berating the Mexican leadership for ignoring her husband's safety. She and Jamie took the case to the U.S. media. Under intense media pressure, the Mexican government was forced to remove the corrupt commander. The DIA issued a statement once again condemning the rot in Mexico's system. Realizing the seriousness, Mexico appointed a new commander, honest and straightforward, to work with the Americans. Elsewhere, El Azul warned Miguel, the Americans are serious this time. You need to leave the country for a while. When do I leave? Right now. As they spoke, the new commander led special forces and U.S. agents in a raid on Miguel's headquarters, but when they burst into his office, Miguel had already escaped through a tunnel. Once outside, Miguel called his high-level government contact to fix the situation, but the man was ready to cut him loose. Thinking better to sacrifice one than lose everyone, Miguel decided to give up Rafa to the authorities, calming the DEA's fury. He called Rafa, reminiscing about their glory days together. Thank you for looking out for me. I know I've caused trouble. If you were me, you'd do the same. Before long, police surrounded Rafa's villa. When captured, Rafa protested they had the wrong man. Who is he? Say his name. Rafa. The commander didn't waste any more words. He yanked Rafa's arm out of its socket, then snapped it back in place. The searing pain broke Rafa's resolve, and he finally revealed where Kiki's body was hidden. At dawn the next day, Jamie led a raid on Rafa's hideout and discovered Kiki's body in a grassy field. The autopsy revealed that Kiki had suffered 3 shattered ribs on his left side, a broken right arm, a fractured jaw, and multiple skull fractures. The fatal blow had been to his head, clear evidence of the brutal torture he endured before his death. Once the case was closed, the U.S. government honored Kiki's bravery, awarding him posthumous commendations and repatriating his body for a solemn burial. Kiki's death enraged top U.S. officials. They ordered the immediate capture of Miguel, the dismantling of his entire criminal alliance, and applied heavy pressure on the Mexican government. With no other choice, Miguel's protectors abandoned him. He went on the run, hiding wherever he could. With nowhere left to go, he returned to his hometown of Sinaloa to seek shelter from his old mentor. But Miguel had angered the entire region, and the governor wanted nothing to do with him. Desperate, Miguel begged for help. After some hesitation, the governor relented. 1 week only. I have a hunting lodge in the mountains, $1 million in cash. Miguel could only laugh bitterly at his situation, but he had no other option. At the hideout, Miguel remained restless, constantly plotting a comeback until his health deteriorated and he coughed up blood. Soon, El Azul from the security agency arrived, handing him a new ID, passport, and 7 audio tapes from Kiki's interrogation, a potential ticket back to power. Meanwhile, the Mexican government sent a commander to work with U.S. agents to capture Miguel. The governor called to say he would personally escort Miguel to the border the next morning, but before that could happen, the commander tracked the governor down, and without hesitation, the governor sold Miguel out. The next morning, as Miguel packed his things, military forces stormed the property. Outgunned, his men were quickly wiped out. While fleeing, Miguel was captured by the commander. Realizing this was a subordinate of his former high-level protector, Miguel immediately offered a deal. He claimed to have 7 tapes containing the names of top officials who had colluded with him. Pull the trigger, and those names go public, but keep 1 bullet for yourself. This empire doesn't tolerate heroes. Let me go, and I'll find a scapegoat to appease the DIA. Think about it. Protect your boss, you get a promotion, plus $2 million in cash. The commander lowered his gun. Not long after, Mexican police arrested Neto in a villa, temporarily closing the case. But within the cartel, a small-time leader with big ambitions gathered bosses from across the country to claim Miguel's position. Suddenly, the sound of helicopters roared outside, and heavily armed soldiers surrounded them. Miguel was back. He had re-established his alliance with top government officials, secured absolute protection, and resumed control over the organization. His status soared, now traveling with military escorts at all times. The U.S., however, wasn't fooled. They formed a special task force, gathering discreetly on the outskirts of Mexico. The lead agent placed a list on the table. They were going to hunt down every last person responsible for kidnapping and torturing Kiki to death. He was the most notorious drug lord in Mexico, Miguel. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, suspected him of being involved in the assassination of Agent Kiki, and to this day, they've never stopped hunting him down. Fortunately for Miguel, the Mexican government, while obediently following U.S. demands on the surface, secretly protected him. Every time he went out, he was escorted by a large convoy of police officers. At one point, when Miguel was cornered, the governor of Sinaloa had given him refuge for a week, but later, that same governor betrayed him to the police, nearly getting him executed on the spot. Miguel had no intention of forgetting or forgiving that debt. His gift in return was Rodolfo, the governor's own son and Miguel's childhood friend. Now 40 years old, Miguel celebrated his birthday with a lavish party. 3 governors personally attended to show their support, and all the regional bosses of the Federation came to pay their respects. El Chapo's crew even gifted him a tiger, a symbol of Miguel's reign as kingpin, sending the atmosphere into a frenzy. But Miguel couldn't truly enjoy himself. The Federation was full of brewing conflicts. His home turf, Sinaloa, was controlled by the trio led by El Chapo, fellow countrymen who often bullied the other territories. The northwest border of Tijuana was run by the Felix brothers, who resented Miguel's favoritism toward his Sinaloa allies. The northern border of Ciudad Juarez was managed by Pablo, who was absent and had sent Amado, nicknamed the Astronaut, to hold the fort. Unable to resolve these internal disputes for now, Miguel could only pressure them to maintain the status quo. His biggest headache was cash flow. Despite the massive profits from the drug trade, he had to pay a cut to the powerful figures protecting him, while the Colombians owed a huge debt for transportation costs. That night, Miguel waited impatiently for a representative from the Cali cartel. Just when his patience was running out, Pacho, one of Cali's 4 bosses, arrived, his presence alone overshadowing Miguel. Inside the family chapel, Miguel admitted he only had enough cash to last 6 months and hoped Cali would settle their transportation debt soon. Pacho scoffed. "You haven't been in this business as long as we have, maybe you don't understand how it works. Product moves fast, but money moves slow." He also pointed out that Miguel's money troubles stemmed from the DEA seizing 40% of his shipment, the direct result of killing Agent Kiki, which had provoked the DEA's wrath. As for the $200 million debt, Pacho said they'd pay when the time was right. Miguel knew Pacho wasn't wrong and could only watch him leave, left to figure out a way to turn things around himself. What Miguel didn't know was that the DEA's actions went beyond just seizing shipments. After the Mexican police released him, the DEA launched a special operation called Leyenda, using the cartel's own tactics against them. Leading the mission was Agent Walt, who brought in U.S. agents and recruited disillusioned Mexicans, including many young police officers. Their first target was to track down the real killers of Kiki. One evening, an elderly doctor was leaving work when masked men stopped him. "Are you Dr. Delgado? What's going on?" Delgado was thrown into a vehicle. When his pleas for mercy failed, he threatened them by boasting of his powerful connections, but the men weren't afraid. The leader was none other than DEA agent Walt. Knowing Delgado had been involved in Kiki's interrogation, Walt wanted to use him to find the mastermind. Delgado lied, claiming all the killers had already been caught. Walt then produced a tape recording Delgado's voice along with the voice of the interrogation leader. Confronted with undeniable evidence, Delgado revealed that the man in charge was Agent Verdun, a member of Mexico's Intelligence and Secret Police, DFS. Walt quickly tracked Verdun's after-work route and devised a plan for capture. That night, they successfully apprehended him. However, the operation was spotted by a passerby. Walt couldn't bring himself to kill the witness, so he confiscated the man's ID and let him go. Interrogating Verdun proved far more difficult than with Delgado because Verdun was well versed in interrogation techniques. Back when he interrogated Kiki, he had ordered the doctor to inject adrenaline to keep Kiki conscious and feeling every ounce of pain. He knew many other equally brutal methods. All of this he had learned during his training with U.S. intelligence, so he knew exactly how to counter Walt's interrogation tactics. Although he'd been hooded during his capture, Verdun calculated from the 40-minute drive that he was still in Mexico, and he was confident police would find him within 24 hours. On top of that, Walt's release of the witness proved he wasn't willing to kill. Verdun figured he only had to endure some physical pain, so he decided to keep silent. "You can't do anything to me. I know exactly what kind of man you are. As expected, Walt's methods were nothing more than child's play, a few punches, at most breaking a thumb, but Verdun still refused to talk. When the U.S. agents were at a loss, a retired Mexican cop named Ossie stepped in, warning that if Verdun walked out alive, their families would be in danger. Ossie shot Verdun through the chest. The bullet pierced his lung, causing agonizing pain but not killing him instantly. Feeling death creep closer, Verdun's arrogance vanished. He immediately confessed that the man who had brought him in to oversee Kiki's interrogation was Zuno, a wealthy man with deep connections to high-ranking officials. Once they had the intel, the team argued over what to do with Verdun. The Mexicans feared revenge and wanted to quietly dispose of him, but Walt and the Americans couldn't go through with it. In the end, they left him outside a hospital. Zuno's wife was the daughter of a former president, and his uncle was the sitting Minister of Defense. With these connections, he served as the bridge between the government and Mexico's drug lords. The next challenge was figuring out how to capture Zuno. Incredibly, the seven-man team planned to grab him straight from a military vehicle, an idea that seemed impossible, yet they pulled it off. Walt's DIA task force located Zuno and split into 3 cars for the operation. Of the 2 men who had interrogated Kiki, Dr. Delgado had disappeared, while Verdun had died from his untreated injuries. Knowing the Americans were behind it, Zuno hid in a seaside villa under heavy guard from his uncle. Walt came up with a bold plan. From security footage, Zuno saw 2 vehicles parked at the villa's front and back entrances, with a third rotating shifts. He assumed this was the American task force. While Zuno was still panicking, Miguel visited his uncle, the Minister of Defense. The sight of a notorious criminal walking openly into the Congress building infuriated the minister, who tried to use his political clout to force Miguel to abandon the drug empire and disappear. But Miguel refused. Mexico's oil company brought in $4 billion a year, while his drug empire generated $15 billion. Pulling all that money out would throw the country into an overnight economic crisis. The 2 men who directly killed Kiki were still unknown, but their link, Zuno, had been exposed. When Zuno realized he was surrounded, he called Miguel, unaware that Walt had tapped the line. After several attempts, he finally reached a fake secretary who told him Miguel was in a meeting and passed along a message. The Americans knew where he was hiding. Terrified, Zuno knew his soldiers couldn't take on U.S. forces, so he decided to move immediately. Ignoring the lieutenant's warning, Zuno left the villa with 2 bodyguards. The soldiers stayed behind to block 2 other cars at the gate. Zuno made it safely to his private jet, and as the plane took off, he breathed a sigh of relief. A few hours later, the plane touched down. To his shock, Zuno saw a fully armed U.S. police unit waiting on the tarmac, and his legs went weak. When the door opened, his 2 bodyguards dropped their guns and surrendered, while Walt stepped out of the cockpit with a big grin. Under Walt's threats, the cowardly Zuno spilled everything. It was all orchestrated by Miguel and the Minister of Defense. Of the 3 original kingpins who built Mexico's drug federation, only Miguel remained. The other 2 had been betrayed by him. One was his close brother Rafa, the other his mentor Netu, both now serving time in Mexican prisons. Without his right-hand men, Miguel often felt stretched thin, especially after the minister's nephew, Zuno, was captured, putting Miguel at risk of a U.S. global arrest warrant. With no other choice, Miguel visited Netu in prison to seek advice. He said he'd been forced to betray Netu before. If Netu helped him neutralize the Zuno problem, Miguel would execute a grand plan to become the most powerful man in Mexico, and then spring Netu out. Netu wouldn't accept the betrayal or a 41-year sentence. After mocking Miguel, he walked away. Nearby, Rafa glared at Miguel with pure hatred, and Miguel left in silence. Then a lifeline appeared. Guerra, the Gulf region Don, called with a way forward. After Miguel's 40th birthday, escorted by the army, he traveled to the Gulf to negotiate with Guerra, a Prohibition-era liquor smuggler turned opium trafficker. Guerra controlled the safest smuggling corridor, but refused to partner with Miguel, knowing Miguel's federation looked mighty but was splintered by infighting. He underestimated Miguel's ambition. Miguel had no intention of being Colombia's delivery boy for scraps. He wanted to control every smuggling route in Mexico, forcing the Colombians to work only with him and to pay in product, giving Miguel his own U.S. market. They talked all day. In the end, Guerra was persuaded and shook hands on an alliance. Sensing a looming crisis, he told Miguel to turn on the TV. Breaking news: a cargo plane shot down in Nicaragua, packed with guns and ammo, tied to a major secret. The CIA was behind the weapons flights, backing the Contra forces to overthrow the Soviet-aligned regime. If you've seen Snowfall, you know this is exactly what CIA operative Teddy does. Miguel understood instantly and arranged a meeting through Mata, his air transport partner. Mata had long moved Colombian shipments to Mexico for Miguel to push into the U.S. He'd originally brokered Miguel's Colombian connections. Hearing Miguel wanted to meet the CIA, Mata warned they might rendition him to the US and hand him to the DIA. Miguel disagreed. The CIA invests. If I bring enough assets to the table, I can buy them. Be careful. You killed one of their agents. They won't forget. Then I'll make them forget. Miguel arrived at a Contra camp in Nicaragua. Soldiers told him Teddy was waiting on the plane. Mustering his nerve, Miguel boarded, convinced the briefcase would buy Teddy's cooperation. But before the interpreter finished, Teddy said he didn't care about money and ordered wheels up, planning to hand Miguel to the DIA. Panicking, Miguel blurted the only English he knew, "Open it, open it." Seeing his desperation, Teddy opened the case. Maps. Miguel hurried to explain. One of Teddy's weapons planes had been shot down, plunging the CIA into a PR firestorm. He could replace Mata's network to help Teddy transport weapons safely to their destination, ensuring no one on the outside would know. All Teddy had to do in return was eliminate the DEA's threat against Miguel. After weighing the pros and cons of capturing him or not, Teddy made his choice. In a U.S. courtroom, Zuno, standing before the judge and jury, suddenly changed his testimony, taking full responsibility for Kiki's murder. The DIA agents were baffled, and Walt, the man who had interrogated and captured Zuno, was even more stunned. While they were meeting to plan their next move, government officials interrupted, ordering the DIA to officially charge Zuno as the sole perpetrator, effectively ending Operation Leyenda. But Walt refused to quit. He returned to Mexico with his special unit to continue investigating Miguel. As Miguel predicted, Teddy convinced CIA higher-ups to resolve Miguel's biggest problem. In return, Miguel kept his word. He met with the Minister of Defense, Zuno's uncle, who, tainted by his nephew's scandal, was struggling to secure his bid for the presidency. After some plotting, the minister handed Mata's location to the DIA, allowing the U.S. to score a major victory in its drug crackdown. This move restored the minister's political standing at home. Once again, Miguel betrayed a partner, taking over Mata's territory. He not only removed the DIA threat but also seized control of the Colombia to Mexico drug route, giving him greater leverage with the Colombians. However, Miguel's empire remained unstable, with all three major territories under strain. First was Ciudad Juarez, run by Pablo. Outwardly fierce, Pablo was utterly obedient to his girlfriend Mimi and was even considering retiring for her. Another problem was the constant conflict between Tijuana and Sinaloa. Whenever Sinaloa pushed around the Felix brothers in Tijuana, Miguel sided with his fellow Sinaloans, fueling resentment. In one incident, El Chapo's crew nearly blinded Felix's younger brother during a bar fight. Seizing the moment, the elder Felix demanded Miguel act fairly. Preoccupied with the Zuno situation, Miguel agreed to back the Felixes, forcing Sinaloa to give them a bigger cut whenever smuggling through Tijuana. Sinaloa refused, and El Chapo devised a perfect solution. Once the world's most wanted fugitive with a $20 million bounty, El Chapo was Mexico's top drug lord in the 1990s. In 2015, during his escape from prison, he spent a year and $50 million digging a tunnel over 10 kilometers long, stunning the world. That tunnel digging strategy began in 1988, when El Chapo was one of three Sinaloa bosses. Miguel had ordered Sinaloa to pay a toll to the Felix brothers for each shipment through Tijuana. Palma and Cachiloco hated the rule but didn't dare defy Miguel. While Palma sought alternate routes, El Chapo, often underestimated, came up with a plan. He bought a warehouse at the Mexican border and another house 400 meters inside the U.S., then dug a tunnel beneath to connect them. From there, Cachiloco and El Chapo moved shipments out of Felix's territory. Unfortunately for them, DIA agent Walt was lying in wait. Before returning to Mexico, Walt had met Calderoni, a man tired of being under Miguel's thumb, offering inside intel. But since Calderoni had once let Miguel go, Walt didn't trust him. Calderoni simply left his business card. Later, when Walt learned Mata had been arrested without his knowledge, he suspected Miguel's hand in it and remembered Calderoni's card. With Calderoni's help, Walt uncovered the rivalry between the two cartels. Upon learning that Sinaloa planned to stash 400 kilos of cocaine in a Tijuana warehouse, Walt set up surveillance outside, ready to strike. As expected, Walt spotted two of Cachiloco's trucks and quickly ordered his team to tail them all the way to a house near the border. About 2 hours later, one truck left. Walt told another unit to follow it while he stayed behind to check the warehouse. Before he could get out, Walt saw a few men quietly climb over the barbed wire fence to scout the place. They soon left in disappointment. Walt figured they were from the Felix brothers. Climbing over the fence himself, Walt found the warehouse completely empty, until the ventilation fan, which had been still, suddenly began spinning again. That was all the confirmation he needed. In reality, Cachiloco had already noticed the surveillance. After moving the goods down into the tunnel, he purposely led the tailing team on a pointless chase. Meanwhile, the ventilation system broke, forcing El Chapo to send men to fix it, delaying shipments to the U.S. That night, Walt returned with another task force member. Suddenly, the couch inside shifted. They hid quickly, then saw someone crawl up from under it, grab a pack of cigarettes from the table, and disappear back down. The Sinaloa crew had dug a drug smuggling tunnel right in Tijuana. Walt's team was excited, but Calderoni suggested another play. Instead of busting a few low-level traffickers, leak the intel and start a war between the factions. To destroy a cartel, you break it apart. Walt didn't like Calderoni, but he couldn't deny the logic. That same night, the Felix brothers got an anonymous call. Soon, the younger brother led a heavily armed crew to Tijuana. A cement truck sped down the road, flanked by over a dozen motorcycles, and rammed straight into the warehouse. A worker in the tunnel peeked up only to see men with M16 rifles, while the Felix brother jumped down from the truck. Hearing the commotion, El Chapo realized trouble had come. The workers near the tunnel entrance were called up. Furious over the intrusion, the Felix brother tossed a grenade into the tunnel entrance. El Chapo and his crew sprinted toward the U.S. exit. As soon as they surfaced, the tunnel collapsed. The Felix crew then executed every worker on site. From a rooftop across the street, Walt heard the gunfire and felt a pang of guilt. They could have seized hundreds of kilos, but instead, their move to stoke conflict had cost many innocent lives. While the factions tore each other apart, Miguel was busy expanding. He visited Amado in Ciudad Juarez, showed him the new airport design, and flew him to Panama. Miguel planned to inform the Cali cartel that he now controlled all smuggling routes, turning Juarez into a distribution hub under Amado's control, and eventually dominating the U.S. market. But upon arrival, Pacho casually announced his partnership with Guerra. Stunned, Miguel lost his leverage and had to pretend he was only there to order more product. Pacho agreed, promising 65 tons. Back at the hotel, Miguel furiously called Guerra, but the seasoned smuggler calmly mocked him, saying everyone who partnered with Miguel ended up betrayed. For the first time, Miguel got a taste of his own medicine. He then called El Azul, asking him to find out why Guerra had suddenly turned against him. That night, Miguel flew back to Guadalajara. El Azul handed him the investigation file, and right on the first page was a striking face: Carlos, the current minister of Mexico. El Azul explained that Miguel's former protector was the Minister of Defense. Although he had cleared himself of suspicion in the DIA agent's murder case, his nephew Zuno was still in prison in the U.S., making it impossible for him to win the upcoming July election. As a result, Carlos had already been chosen by the ruling party as the next presidential candidate. Guerra, being a longtime friend of Carlos's father, felt emboldened enough to cancel his verbal agreement with Miguel. But Miguel was not the type to accept defeat easily. He knew he had to build a relationship with Carlos, or his drug empire would soon collapse. While Miguel sat in his car, lost in thought, a bullet suddenly whizzed by. He and his driver ducked for cover as the car swerved and crashed into a utility pole. His security team rushed over. Thankfully, he wasn't injured, but the shooter had vanished. The next day, Miguel went to Carlos's home in the capital. There, he saw Guerra and the Carlos brothers in a friendly group photo. The host invited him in, but it was Carlos's older brother who greeted him, not Carlos himself. Miguel tried to win him over, but the man showed no interest, not even in money, and warned Miguel to stay away from Guerra. Perplexed, Miguel ordered El Azul to investigate and decided to return to Sinaloa to avoid another assassination attempt. El Azul also reported that tensions between Miguel's two major factions were escalating. El Chapo of Sinaloa had dug a tunnel under Tijuana's territory to secretly transport drugs, enraging the Felix brothers. They bombed the tunnel, nearly burying El Chapo alive. In retaliation, El Chapo killed their men. With the blood feud worsening, Miguel simply ordered both sides to stand down, have Sinaloa pay toll fees to Tijuana, and end the violence. Days later, El Azul returned with the truth. The Carlos brothers weren't interested in Miguel's dirty money because they were aiming for something far bigger: the privatization of state-owned enterprises. By buying them cheaply and putting them under friends' names, they would secure massive legal profits. Compared to that, Miguel's drug money was insignificant. Miguel realized he would have to fight this battle alone. Meanwhile, Amado, the Lord of the Skies, traveled to Belize, a little-known Central American nation. At an auction, he purchased 6 Boeing aircraft at Miguel's request, building his own fleet to turn Ciudad Juarez into a major drug distribution hub. What Amado didn't know was that DIA agent Walt and his team were tailing him. Acting on intelligence from undercover cop Calderoni, Walt followed Amado from Mexico to Belize, recorded the aircraft serial numbers, and secretly planted GPS trackers before the planes were delivered. Tracking the signals, Walt discovered the planes had been moved to a newly built airport. After observing for some time, he saw Amado preparing 6 fuel trucks, a suspicious move. The only logical conclusion: Miguel planned to use the entire fleet to move 65 tons of Cali cartel cocaine to Mexico in one go. If anything happened to the shipment, the Cali cartel would destroy Miguel without Dia lifting a finger. At that moment, Miguel was still tied up with internal conflicts. Although he had warned Tijuana and Sinaloa to ease tensions, transporting 65 tons still required both factions' cooperation. He personally called the Felix brothers in Tijuana, but the older brother, having heard about the assassination attempt, believed Miguel's glory days were over and coldly declared that Tijuana wanted to withdraw from the alliance. To appease the Tijuana cartel, Miguel had no choice but to agree to Felix's brother's demands. He personally went to see Palma, the leader of the Sinaloa cartel, and informed him that the Felix brothers were planning to take out Cachiloco. At that time, Cachiloco, the cartel's number 2, was on his way to Tijuana to pay the overdue toll fee to the Felix brothers. Palma couldn't believe that such a minor payment dispute had escalated to the point of killing one of their top men. He begged Miguel to save Cachiloco, but Miguel simply said, "It's too late." Sure enough, Cachiloco encountered Felix's younger brother on the road and was immediately gunned down by his men. From that moment, Miguel's fellow Sinaloans began plotting to betray him. Palma contacted Pablo, the boss of the Juarez cartel, and together they decided to overthrow Miguel's drug empire. Meanwhile, Palma's wife left the house claiming she was going out, but in reality, she was cheating on him with Miguel's driver bodyguard. Neither Palma nor Pablo knew their phone call had been wiretapped and reported straight to Miguel. At the same time, Miguel was focused on manipulating the upcoming presidential election. In Mexico, the Institutional Revolutionary Party, PRI, had held the presidency for decades, and anyone nominated internally was almost guaranteed to win. The Minister of Defense, Miguel's political protector, had failed to secure the nomination himself and was now seeking to align with Carlos, PRI's new candidate. However, Carlos's brother showed little interest in working with Miguel. Just as Miguel was cornered, he noticed another strong contender, Cardenas, a popular figure among the public. Miguel proposed to the defense minister that they back Cardenas, but the response left him stunned. Cardenas had once been a member of the PRI but quit in protest against the party's corruption. Now running as an independent, he despised drug traffickers like Miguel and, according to the minister, was certain to win, ending PRI's decades-long dominance. The minister showed Miguel the new electronic voting system, revealing that Cardenas was leading in major cities, while Carlos had the edge only in remote areas. Historically, urban results were reported first, which would energize Cardenas's supporters and discourage Carlos's. Miguel's mind raced. If he could help Carlos win, he could regain PRI's backing. He contacted Carlos's brother and campaign advisor, offering a plan. In return, they promised to safeguard all of Miguel's interests. Miguel then approached the voting system's programmer to install 2 codes, one fake tally favoring PRI, displayed in white, and one real tally, displayed in blue. By broadcasting the fake results to the media, they could create the illusion that Cardenas was losing, dampen his supporters' enthusiasm, and sway the election, a psychological manipulation tactic the U.S. had used time and again. At that moment, Miguel received a call from Pacho, informing him that the cocaine shipment he'd requested was ready. The Cali cartel had prepared 70 tons and urged Miguel to move it quickly. Miguel knew that if he didn't secure victory in tonight's presidential election, the deal might fall through, jeopardizing his position. He immediately called Amado at the airport, ordering him to transport the shipment from Colombia to Mexico within 3 days. Amado was frustrated. He was in the middle of converting passenger seats into cargo racks, forcing workers to work overtime to meet the deadline. Just then, one plane's electrical system malfunctioned. When he went to inspect it, he found a strange device under the control panel, the surveillance bug planted by DIA agent Walt. The handsome man in question, Claver, was Miguel's personal driver, and he had stolen the heart of Palma's wife. Palma was the Sinaloa boss under Miguel. During Miguel's 40th birthday party, Palma and his wife attended, and she became captivated by Claver. In public, she could only exchange a few words with him, but they gradually began an affair. When Palma decided to betray Miguel, he called Pablo, the Juarez cartel boss, to plot Miguel's downfall. At that time, Miguel was busy rigging the presidential election, so he immediately ordered both men killed. Unbeknownst to Miguel, Claver called Palma's wife to warn her. Terrified, she confessed everything to Palma, fearing for her husband and child despite her affair. Soon after, Miguel's men arrived at Palma's house. El Azul, the leader, found the place empty, but the food and wine on the table showed they had just been there. Taking a sip of wine, he opened the curtains and spotted Palma's wife running with their child. Before El Azul could warn his men, Palma gunned them down with an AK-47. El Azul flipped a table for cover, but his handgun was no match. He lay flat, trembling, until he spotted a wine bottle. Stuffing a handkerchief into it, he lit it and threw it toward Palma. As the flames blocked Palma's path, El Azul dove out the window to escape. In Juarez, Amado learned Miguel had ordered Pablo's death and rushed to warn him, but Pablo, with the pride of a seasoned drug lord, refused to run. His American girlfriend, Mimi, had long urged him to retire, but leaving the business was far harder than joining it. Finally, Mimi saw her chance. She contacted DEA agent Walt, offering to take him to Pablo and provide valuable intel on Miguel. Though afraid he might end up dead in Mexico like Kiki, Walt feared repeated failure even more and decided to meet them alone. He put on a hood and went with Mimi to meet Pablo. After talking, Walt realized Pablo was still hesitant, so he made a generous offer: cross into the US and receive witness protection for himself and Mimi. Pablo didn't answer, only taking Walt's business card. After much thought, Pablo chose not to go with Walt but instead spoke to the Sun reporter, revealing details about Miguel. He was willing to put himself in the line of fire to ensure Mimi's safety. When the article was published, Miguel was furious but focused on the day's main goal, ensuring Carlos's election victory. He ordered El Azul to find Pablo immediately. Walt also read the article and rushed to find Mimi, but her house was empty. Suddenly, he was struck from behind. Walt came to with a pounding headache, finding himself face to face with two FBI agents. They had been working with Mexican police to capture Pablo, who had exposed the names of too many high-profile figures to the press. Using that intel, the FBI tracked Mimi, only to run into Walt. After knocking him out, they realized he was DEA. Following brief questioning, they told him to report any future intel immediately before letting him go. That same day, Miguel, whose private life had just been exposed by Pablo in the press, was closely monitoring the progress of the presidential election. He had to ensure Carlos from the PRI won. The 1988 election introduced new technology that allowed polling stations to transmit results to the Capitol almost instantly. At the data center, results were compiled and displayed on a giant screen for party representatives and reporters to watch. What no one knew was that the numbers on the screen were fake. The Minister of Defense walked up behind the programmer and requested to see the real data. When the programmer entered the code, the true results appeared. Carlos's support in the Capitol was only half of that for the independent candidate, Cardenas. But on the big screen, the numbers were completely reversed. This falsified data was quickly reported by the media, discouraging many Cardenas supporters from voting. At that moment, a pro-Cardenas congressman noticed the minister lingering behind the programmer. Curious, he took a look and realized the computer data didn't match the public display. Suspicion of vote rigging sparked a heated argument, drawing a crowd. Sensing trouble, the minister rushed into the control room, cut the power, and returned to announce that the system had crashed. The strange incident shifted everyone's attention to the manual vote count. Once completed, the result could no longer be altered. Miguel wasn't worried. He called El Chapo, the Sinaloa boss, promising to forgive Palma's betrayal. Then he phoned the Felix brothers in Tijuana, offering them a bigger cut. Tempted, the cartels sent their men to sabotage polling stations and alter vote tallies. Add another zero right here. The real results were erased. In the end, Carlos from the PRI became president. Even though protests erupted nationwide, nothing could change the outcome. Meanwhile, the FBI and police located Pablo's hideout in a small town where locals adored him. Troops were deployed for the arrest. Pablo and his men fought fiercely but were ultimately gunned down. Upon hearing the news, Amado was devastated. Locals recovered Pablo's body and held a grand funeral in his honor. With his lead gone, Walt pinned all his hopes on the tracking devices hidden in Amado's planes. The drug trade, like any other business, had three critical links. Colombia supplied, the U.S. consumed, and Mexico transported. In 1987, around 140 tons of cocaine entered the U.S. This time, Miguel planned to move 70 tons in a single night. He left the job to Amado's air fleet while attending the new president's inauguration. DEA agent Walt had been monitoring Amado's airfield for a long time, even planting trackers on 6 planes. From the locator's screen, Walt saw the 6 planes take off at dawn from Ciudad Juarez Valley and return at night. He and his strike team hid on a nearby hillside, watching dozens of men unload cargo, with several vehicles guarding the perimeter. Taking advantage of the darkness, they silently took out a few guards, hijacked a truck, and drove into the airfield, ordering everyone to clear out. The agents poured kerosene over the cargo to burn it, but when one tasted it, it turned out to be pure sugar. Before they could react, a heavily armed group stormed out of the warehouse. Gunfire shredded their vehicles, forcing the agents to retreat. One wounded agent begged Walt to get him into a truck. Walt slammed the vehicle straight into an enemy fuel tanker, causing a massive explosion that covered their escape. As he pushed through the brush, Walt realized another teammate had been shot and collapsed behind him. Walt told another team member to return to a safe hideout while he hid in the bushes, waiting for a chance to rescue his injured comrade. Two armed men approached, then a car pulled up. The man who stepped out was none other than Calderoni, the same man who had long been feeding them intelligence. Calderoni shot the two men dead, then killed the wounded DIA agent before luring the armed group away. Only then did he turn toward the bushes. Walt, still hiding, had no idea what was going on. 2 days earlier, Amato had discovered the tracking devices. Miguel, unsure who planted them, ordered Amato to use fake cargo as bait and told Calderoni to set a trap with the federal police. Calderoni made sure no one survived to prevent Miguel from discovering his betrayal, but he wasn't foolish enough to kill a DIA agent. He knew Walt was hiding and accused him of not trusting him. Calderoni had given him intel many times, yet Walt always kept him in the dark during operations. This is all on you. Today, you were meant to die, Walt. But I'm letting you go. Get out of here. Don't stop until you hear someone speaking English. The operation was a complete failure. Back at DIA headquarters in Washington, Walt was reassigned to a desk job. His earlier promises to Mexican recruits were also voided by the DIA. 70 tons of cocaine, valued at $4 a gram in Colombia, was worth $280 million at the source. In the U.S., that amount could fetch up to $10 billion, roughly half of the cocaine trafficked into the country in a year. Miguel planned to move it all into Mexico in a single night, a massive gamble, but he won. This success earned him the respect of every cartel boss under his network. But he also learned a valuable lesson. He would no longer act as the boss of the Federation, but as a partner to the other factions. Miguel split the 70 tons into 4 parts, one for each of the 3 major factions, and the last for Guerra in the Gulf region. From now on, profits would be shared. The Tijuana cartel remained under the Felix brothers. After Pablo, the leader of the Ciudad Juarez cartel, was killed by police, Amato took control of the territory. In Sinaloa, after Palma's betrayal and escape, the second-in-command Cachiloco was killed by the Felix brothers, leaving third in line El Chapo to take the throne. Miguel's shift in approach eased tensions between the factions. His life returned to a quieter rhythm in his hometown of Sinaloa. During this time, El Chapo visited several times, asking him to spare Palma, but Miguel wasn't ready to agree. In 1989, California police received an anonymous tip, leading them to raid a warehouse in Hilmar and seize 20 tons of cocaine, the largest drug bust in history at that point. The shipment had been moved there by Miguel for the Cali cartel. Losing such a massive load infuriated Pacho, who immediately flew to Guadalajara to meet Miguel. This time, Pacho dropped his arrogance and spoke humbly, asking for help. Miguel calmly set his terms. From now on, any shipment passing through Mexico would have to leave half behind. His long-standing plan was clear. He didn't just want to be a middleman, he wanted in on the market. Colombians in the U.S. numbered fewer than 800,000, while Mexicans exceeded 1 million. Through this community, they could dominate the U.S. market and force the Colombians to play by their rules. At that point, Miguel was the only man capable of moving product from Colombia into the U.S. Despite his tough demands, Pacho had no choice but to agree. El Azul warned Miguel that the other cartel leaders might not accept the new business model. They preferred smuggling over distribution due to the lower risk, but Miguel had already made up his mind. Once again, Miguel saw himself as the boss of the entire Federation and ordered El Azul to summon all the cartel leaders for a meeting. To ensure no one dared oppose him, Miguel chose Palma, who had once betrayed him, as an example to intimidate the rest. Although he didn't know Palma's exact whereabouts, Miguel discovered where Palma's wife was staying. Clavel, Miguel's driver, eager to regain his boss's trust, followed orders and approached her. Clavel told his former lover that Miguel had forgiven Palma and that he was sent to bring her and the children home. Palma's wife happily took her 2 children along, unaware she was walking into a trap. "I'm sorry, Serrano, but I have no other choice." Clavel coldly shot his former lover, then killed the 2 children in the car, and dumped all 3 bodies off a bridge. Miguel did this to kill the chicken to scare the monkey, ensuring that at the meeting, the cartel leaders would fall in line. At the meeting, Miguel announced that the Federation would shift its focus from helping Colombians transport cocaine to directly selling it in the U.S. Unexpectedly, the Tijuana cartel had no interest in this plan. The older Felix brother stood up and announced their withdrawal from the Federation. Soon after, El Chapo declared Sinaloa's withdrawal, and El Azul, Miguel's longtime ally, left with him. Although furious, Miguel still believed he had Ciudad Juarez under Amato's loyalty, but to his surprise, Amato left as well. Ever since Miguel betrayed Amato's uncle, Neto, Amato had been quietly waiting for revenge. Now he partnered with Pacho of the Cali cartel, bypassing Miguel and successfully striking a deal. From now on, Amado would handle transporting cocaine into Mexico, and the cartels would distribute it to the US themselves. So, you're the boss of the Federation now. There's no Federation anymore. Amado stated that the cartels would operate independently, only cooperating as equals, no hierarchy. It's likely Amado had been behind the mass withdrawals all along, deceiving Miguel from the start. On April 8, 1989, Mexico's most powerful drug lord, Miguel, was arrested at his home. Leading the operation was Calderoni, the man who had once spared his life. Miguel offered no resistance, and Carlos, the president he had helped into power, abandoned him without hesitation. Before the raid, Calderoni had contacted the DEA, specifically inviting Agent Walt to join. After Miguel's arrest, the DEA proudly declared Operation Leyenda a success. Walt regained favor with his superiors, and the U.S. acknowledged Mexico's efforts in the war on drugs. The two nations later signed a trade agreement. The remaining cartel leaders gathered and agreed to treat each other as equals. Everyone was satisfied, except Miguel, who now faced the rest of his 40 years in prison. Miguel's sycophantic driver, Clavel, also met a grim fate, beaten to death by Palma. Still full of unanswered questions, Walt visited Miguel, but the kingpin revealed nothing. That was because, upon his arrest, Calderoni had delivered a message from higher-ups: if you want to live, keep your mouth shut. Nevertheless, Miguel predicted the future of the drug trade. While the major cartels seemed stable now, this balance would soon collapse. Sinaloa was the only one without a direct route into the U.S. El Chapo couldn't seize Amado's air routes in Ciudad Juarez or Guerra's sea routes, leaving only the land routes through Tijuana, controlled by the Felix brothers. Guerra in the Gulf might appear to be the fisherman, but the real one was Amado, a man who had patiently hidden his ambitions for years. He was destined to become the largest drug lord in Mexico's history. Oh my, look who's here. Without saying a word, Amado pulled the trigger and killed the boss. The henchmen around him froze in shock. Since 1989, when Mexican drug lord Miguel was captured, his criminal federation had collapsed, and the cartels carved up their territories to rule independently. In Ciudad Juarez, the leader was Aguilar, while Amado, the man who had helped topple Miguel, had too few connections and resources, forcing him to settle as the cartel's number 2. Months later, while transporting a shipment from Colombia, Amado's plane malfunctioned near the airport. Thanks to his flying skills, the plane crashed, but both he and the cargo survived intact. As his men arrived to unload, several military vehicles rolled up. Amado fled with his crew, but the army chased them down. His men tried to fire back, but the soldiers had heavy weapons. After a brutal chase, all his men were killed, and Amado was captured alive and taken to a nearby prison. 3 months later, thanks to Aguilar's bribes, Amado was released. Upon meeting Aguilar, the first thing he brought up was the plan he had mentioned before prison, to secure a warehouse in El Paso, just 10 kilometers from the U.S., so they wouldn't put all their eggs in one basket. Aguilar still refused, saying it would only raise costs. Days later, Aguilar introduced Amado to Hank, a powerful politician in the PRI. If the president was the face of ultimate power, Hank was the hand pulling the strings, controlling every party decision, even choosing the next president. Hank planned to buy land in Ciudad Juarez, but Aguilar refused to sell. Hank didn't push, telling them to think it over. Amado kept quiet, but thought Aguilar's move was foolish. At the time, the U.S. and Mexico were signing a free trade agreement. If successful, Ciudad Juarez, a key border city, would face massive changes. After days of thought, Amado decided to take Aguilar out, leading to the opening scene. From then on, Amado became the boss of Ciudad Juarez. His first move was intercepting Hank's plane and handing over the land deeds. The land is yours, no compensation needed. Hank, of course, didn't believe in free gifts, but Amado had done his homework. Hank had laundered money for the Felix brothers in Tijuana, meaning he could work with Amado too. Where's your partner? He's dead, it's just me now. Recognizing Amado as a valuable ally, and with the trade agreement now signed, Hank became his gateway to take the business to the next level. Meanwhile, the Sinaloa cartel was struggling. El Chapo was at a beauty pageant, eyeing the crown winner of Sinaloa. His men told him the top 2 leaders were waiting outside. He told a judge, "Pick contestant number 10 as the winner." Outside, he learned their shipment had reached the U.S.-Mexico border only to be stopped by Tijuana, claiming they hadn't paid the toll fee. El Azul, I already paid. They say you didn't. Tijuana's location gave the Felix brothers total control over a key smuggling route, just 30 kilometers from California and under 200 kilometers from Los Angeles. Sinaloa, on the central Pacific coast, could only move product through Tijuana, meaning they had to pay a hefty fee. A few days earlier, they had attended the Felix family wedding. The sister married a famous lawyer. At the reception, Palma tried to talk business. "Not today, brother, just enjoy the food." Palma dropped it, but now Felix's men were causing trouble. He suggested buying a section of the border route, but El Azul was sure they'd refuse. If they don't agree, we'll take it. Calm down, El Chapo. El Azul, we need the money from this shipment. The three leaders of the Sinaloa cartel went to see Mayo, an independent drug trafficker in Mazatlan, Sinaloa. Mayo didn't belong to any cartel. Years ago, the Felix brothers had tried to recruit him to Tijuana, but he preferred working solo. They explained Sinaloa's current struggles and hoped Mayo could help persuade the Felix brothers to sell them the Imperial Valley territory. It was a barren desert Tijuana barely used, but for Sinaloa, it was more than enough. Mayo refused to negotiate for them but tipped them off. The Felix family was about to throw a birthday party for the older brother in the south. They could go and make their own deal. Following Mayo's lead, the three arrived and presented their proposal. The older Felix brother thought for a moment and said, "We'll leave the desert to you. $3 million a year, 2-year lease. After that, we renegotiate." This meant renting the Imperial Valley, far from what Sinaloa had hoped for, but with no better options, they agreed. Before leaving, they were invited to stay for his 40th birthday celebration. He had no idea Sinaloa was plotting a war, and tonight's party was the perfect opportunity. The whole Felix family gathered in a bar to celebrate. As usual, the younger Felix brother teased his new brother-in-law. "Ever seen my sister angry? Shouldn't you be worried about her, instead of me?" Everyone laughed, praising the groom's wit. After a drink, the younger brother pulled the elder away to reveal his surprise, a light show on a boat. The older Felix was delighted. Then he spotted 2 police officers downstairs. Not wanting them to ruin the party, he handed bodyguard David some cash to send them away. But when David went down, he saw 2 more officers on the second floor, guns trained on the brothers. Alerted, David looked down again to see the officers below talking on radios. Without hesitation, he opened fire. Chaos erupted instantly. The 2 upstairs sprayed bullets toward the balcony. David killed one, fighting and retreating at the same time. More men in police uniforms flooded the bar. David fought back with a single gun against the swarm. The Felix brothers used the moment to escape out the other side, but the police chased hard. The younger Felix shouted for everyone to run, but when he turned, he saw his brother-in-law lagging behind, and then El Chapo, disguised as a cop, shot him down. Outnumbered, he had no choice but to flee. El Chapo searched furiously but couldn't find his target. Hearing sirens closing in, he pulled back. The Felix brothers left the scene in a hurry. Their sister Enadina arrived and checked every car, but her husband was nowhere to be found. One look at her brothers' faces told her the truth. Her newlywed husband was dead at El Chapo's hands. "We will make them pay." Her eldest brother didn't promise anything. Even though Sinaloa had fired the first shot, he needed Amato's approval before retaliating, but Amato was nowhere to be found. For days, Enadina refused to eat or drink. When she emerged, she asked, "Is Joaquin Guzman Laura, El Chapo, dead yet?" "We're working on it," her brother said. She turned and walked back inside. Watching his grieving sister, the elder Felix made up his mind. No matter the cost, they would take El Chapo's head. Amato earned the title Lord of the Skies because he built an entirely new smuggling network, one that changed the rules of the drug trade forever. The 3 biggest drug lords of the 1980s all viewed their cartels as a unified empire. In the early 1990s, although he wasn't yet the top kingpin, Amato began a completely new method. He divided the Juarez cartel into multiple units, each handling a specific function, operating independently, and unaware of the other's existence. Amato called this the hive system. Even if one unit failed, the rest could keep running smoothly. The queen bee behind it all was Amato himself. Of course, he couldn't manage everything alone, so he brought in his brother Vicente to handle problems. Financial matters were handed over to Corral, a newly recruited university graduate with an impressive salary. Though promising, the hive system needed time to perfect. Previously, Amato personally transported cocaine from Colombia to Mexico, then distributed it to other Mexican factions for shipment to the U.S., but during the system's construction, he stopped going to Colombia, angering his supplier, the Cali cartel. Pacho summoned Amato to demand answers. Hearing about this new system, Pacho wasn't impressed and even threatened to give the transport routes to the Tijuana cartel. "Unless I'm dead, no one's taking my product." Pacho replied coldly, "Just don't let your corpse stain my fur rug." That night, Amato met Pacho again. After hearing his pitch, Pacho seemed slightly swayed. "How long do you need?" "Give me 2 months. 1 month. After relentless work, the hive system officially launched. Even when some worker bees were caught, police could extract nothing useful, since pickups were arranged with secret codes and a robotic voice giving time and location. Thanks to this security, Juarez grew stronger than ever. But at the same time, the Felix brothers in Tijuana were attacked by El Chapo's Sinaloa cartel. The older Felix brother wanted Amato's opinion before striking back, but Amato was preoccupied with shocking news. In December 1993, Pablo Escobar was shot dead in Medellin. Amato instantly knew his moment had arrived. With Medellin gone, Cali now controlled Colombia's market entirely. Amato arranged a meeting in Cuba with Pacho, and, for the first time, met Cali's secret bosses, Gilberto and Santa Cruz. His proposal: Cali would let him transport their product, taking a cut as payment. This way, Cali's money flow stayed internal, minimizing DIA exposure, while Amato gained entry into the U.S. retail market. They'd divide territories in advance to avoid conflict. It was a win-win, and the Cali bosses agreed. While Amato moved closer to becoming Mexico's #1 drug lord, the Felix brothers, unable to reach him, decided to go to war with Sinaloa. David, who had played a major role in the bar attack, was tasked with forming a special hit squad. Born in San Diego and jailed for murder at 16, David quickly recruited a group of black gunmen. As Tijuana prepared for war, Sinaloa was still scrambling for new smuggling routes. The failed bar attack hadn't killed the Felix brothers but ensured their revenge and cut off Sinaloa's path through Tijuana. Unable to contact Amato, Palma headed to the Gulf to negotiate, while El Azul and El Chapo went to see Mayo. Mayo told them bluntly that their tiny boat was no match for the storm they were facing. Just then, El Azul got a call from Palma. The Gulf faction had refused to let them use their smuggling route. Before they left, El Chapo couldn't help but ask, "If you were us, what would you do? Lay low for a while, wait for the storm to pass, treat your men generously, you'll need their loyalty, keep looking for Amato. He hates letting friends down, and one more thing, my friend, pray for an earthquake in Tijuana." Mayo wasn't a big name in the business yet, but his words showed he was destined to make it big. Following El Azul's advice, El Chapo hid out in a safe house in Guadalajara. Weeks of being cooped up made him restless. When he heard Amato was returning to Ciudad Juarez, he decided, "We'll meet him in person, he won't turn us down." But the younger Felix brother had already learned El Chapo's flight details. After consulting his older brother, they planned an ambush at the airport. The next day, El Chapo arrived at Guadalajara airport as planned, even hiring local police as escorts. He had no idea he was being tracked. Felix had brought his special hit squad. Felix and David split up. David monitored outside while Felix moved inside. As soon as El Chapo appeared, a Felix gunman outside opened fire but missed, and was quickly shot dead by police. Felix burst out of the terminal, gunning down the two police escorts. El Chapo scrambled over a divider, jumped into a white car, and tried to flee. Felix radioed David in the parking lot. David located the vehicle and opened fire, killing both occupants. But when Felix approached, he found the car empty. El Chapo had fled on foot. Among the dead was one of the most beloved priests in the country. In broad daylight, two major cartels had turned an airport into a war zone, leaving 7 civilians dead, including the respected priest. The public was outraged. News reports named the culprits, the Felix brothers of Tijuana and the 3 leaders of Sinaloa, with special emphasis on El Chapo as the most dangerous. "They were trying to kill me, I never touched the priest," El Chapo protested. His associate replied, "Kid, the government's at war with both sides now, no one cares about the truth." To answer public outrage and prepare for the upcoming free trade agreement, the US and Mexico formed a joint task force to crush both cartels. The Mexican military would take the lead, with the US providing intelligence and sending an agent to Tijuana. Walt, our old friend from the first 2 seasons, volunteered. In Tijuana, Walt met General Rebolo, the man who once captured Amato and burned over $1 million worth of his product. Impressed by his resolve, Walt knew he was in the right place. Meanwhile, realizing how dangerous things had become, El Chapo decided to flee south, to Guatemala. Felix's older brother thought there was nothing to worry about. In Tijuana, with his extensive network, he believed he could rely on his connections to get through this crisis. But clearly, he still didn't understand human nature. Both his sister and younger brother urged him to lay low for a while, but he insisted that his powerful political contacts would help him. To his surprise, after calling everyone on his list, not a single person answered. As the saying goes, when you're on top, everyone's a friend. When you're down, no one picks up the phone. Just then, a local priest answered his call. At that moment, having the church's support was crucial. After saying goodbye to his sister, Felix's older brother headed to a cafe to meet him, unaware that the area had been turned into a trap. Streets were blocked, and the cafe was filled with soldiers. He arrived with his bodyguards, and when the priest heard the commander's signal, he stood up to greet him. The moment Felix's older brother stepped inside, they would arrest him. Unaware, he casually walked toward the entrance, but then noticed the priest's tense expression. Looking down both sides of the street, he saw that the once busy road was now eerily empty. Realizing it was a setup, he immediately turned back toward his car. The ambush team moved in, he sped away, only to find a military vehicle blocking his path. He reversed, but 2 more vehicles cut him off. With no escape, he and his bodyguards prepared to fight. Suddenly, his younger brother appeared with reinforcements, blowing up the nearby military vehicle and yelling for them to get in. The 4 men sped off, escaping the trap. The operations commander, General Rabolo, decided not to give chase once they were out of range. Back home, he told his sister what had happened. It turned out she had sent their brother to help when she feared for his safety. Realizing she was right, he finally agreed to go into hiding. When Walt heard the news, he was furious and demanded to know why Rabolo didn't order the arrest. But the general had his reasons. In this never-ending war on drugs, victory was only possible with public support. He wouldn't risk civilian casualties that might turn the people against them. After a frank discussion, Walt understood his point. Then came good news from Rabolo. We let Felix's brother slip away, but a few hours ago, El Chapo was captured at the Guatemala border. When El Chapo reached the border, he had already bribed Guatemalan police and handed them a prepared bag to cross safely. But soon after, those same officers betrayed him. He was handed over to Mexican authorities, sentenced to 20 years for multiple charges, and locked in a maximum security prison. Ironically, this prison sentence was a blessing in disguise. Before, he was just a small-time player in the Sinaloa cartel. Inside, he met Netu, an influential mentor who would help him become the most powerful drug lord in the world. While the Felix brothers and El Chapo were both weakened by their feud, Amado in Ciudad Juarez focused solely on his own operations, becoming the leader of 3 cartels overnight. But then came unexpected news. The Lord of the Skies had more money than he could even spend. After successfully partnering with the Cali cartel, payment for transportation switched from cash to cocaine. This allowed Amado to enter the U.S. retail market, moving around 5 tons a month and making $180 million in profit. But the good times didn't last. Pacho from Cali arrived with shocking news. After Medellin's collapse, Cali's leaders didn't want to share the same fate. They had agreed to the government's proposal. Serve a few years in prison, keep their fortunes intact and re-emerge as legitimate businessmen. This was a bolt from the blue for Amado. He had just lost his most reliable supply source, the Cali cartel, and now had to find a new one. Tijuana faced the same problem. With the Felix brothers' leader in hiding, the cartel was left under the control of Enadina. She reached out to Colombia's North Valley cartel and was awaiting a response. Enadina called Amado, hoping they could join forces to secure a new supply and drive prices down. Amado didn't object, but after hanging up, he immediately arranged a meeting with Orlando, the boss of North Valley. At this moment, Amado held the upper hand. Only his air fleet could transport such massive quantities for Colombia. I need product. 4 tons a week. Amado mentioned he'd be meeting other suppliers later that afternoon. Orlando quickly cut him off. No need to look elsewhere. North Valley is happy to serve you. Amado laid down his condition. North Valley would supply him exclusively. This effectively cut off Tijuana's supply. After weighing both sides, Orlando decisively chose Amado. When Enadina heard the news, she was furious. After consulting with her brother, she decided to show Tijuana's strength. Mayo's fishing vessel used for smuggling was set on fire. Sinaloa's El Azul was gunned down in the street. The police chief almost caught the Felix boss, but the younger brother shot him dead. Amado was ambushed in a restaurant but narrowly escaped. This all-out war pushed Mayo, once neutral, into joining the weakest cartel, Sinaloa. He visited El Chapo in prison and pledged allegiance. Mayo's first move was to contact Amado. Amado was surprised. You know Sinaloa isn't worth much now, right? They have manpower, they just need leadership. What they lack is a foothold at the border. Mayo believed the Felix brothers were desperate, fighting enemies on all fronts, and this was the perfect chance to quietly take their turf. The key is to act in silence. Silent moves were Amado's specialty, from toppling Miguel to dealing blows to Tijuana. What do you need from me? El Chapo has men, I need cash and product to operate. After a brief pause, Amado agreed to front Mayo the money and product, on one condition: make the entire Felix family disappear. The prison housing El Chapo was more of a training camp for criminals, run by a seasoned veteran named Netu. Once Miguel's strategist, he'd been betrayed and jailed. Meeting Netu transformed El Chapo into a future drug lord. At this point, the Sinaloa cartel was in shambles. Palma was on the run, El Azul was dead, El Chapo was imprisoned, and Mayo was marked by Tijuana. Mayo seized the moment. While Tijuana was busy fighting the military, he quietly bought out their turf. El Chapo was worried. Every time they'd gone to war with Tijuana, it ended badly, but Netu explained, before they fought openly, Mayo was infiltrating piece by piece. Any dealer getting product from Tijuana had to pay a toll to the Felix family. Mayo brought in men and weapons, anyone who resisted was killed, anyone who obeyed was recruited. Soon, most small-time dealers in Tijuana knew the Felix family had lost control. El Chapo finally understood Mayo's strategy: manpower from Sinaloa, product and money from Amado, and patience. Tijuana's downfall was only a matter of time. Of course, Amado wouldn't lose out. When the snipe and the clam fight, he would be the fisherman reaping the reward. He went to meet Orlando, the leader of the North Valley cartel, to ensure that after Cali surrendered to the government, they would still supply him with goods regularly and on time. Once again, Orlando reassured Amado but added a condition: since North Valley had a long-standing feud with Cali, they wanted to take advantage of Pacho's last visit to Mexico to carry out an assassination. Although Amado was close to Pacho, to secure his own business, he silently agreed to Orlando's plan. However, right after the meeting, Amado called Pacho to try to convince him to leave Cali. Pacho disagreed with the government surrender plan but considered the other two Cali bosses as brothers, so he still decided to follow their arrangement. Amado could only hang up in frustration. At the same time, the Voice of Tijuana newspaper, while investigating Amado's associate Hank, dragged him into a serious scandal. That morning, a gruesome scene appeared on a bridge in Tijuana: a man hanging in midair, the same person who had recently been persuading small-time dealers to side with Mayo. Mayo immediately knew the Felix family had discovered he was secretly taking their territory. Despite their threats, Mayo refused to back down. Behind him stood not only El Chapo of Sinaloa but also Amado of Ciudad Juarez. Mayo met with Amado, saying the Felix family was on the verge of collapse and now was the perfect time to seize Tijuana. He asked Amado to supply him with more product, but Amado refused. Mayo found this strange. After all, Amado had once been attacked by the Felix family, so why wouldn't he want someone to take revenge for him? What puzzled Mayo even more was that after a priest was killed in a shootout between two cartels, the military launched raids across Mexico, yet Ciudad Juarez, Amado's stronghold, was untouched. Of course, Amado wasn't about to reveal the real reason. Mayo had no choice but to return to face the Felix family's counterattack. While the three cartels were locked in conflict, Voice of Tijuana dug deeper into Amado's bank transactions. They discovered he was sending $200,000 each month to a mysterious woman, suspecting Hank was behind her. But after days of investigation, they were shocked to learn that the person behind her wasn't Hank, but General Rebolo, the commander of the anti-drug operation. No wonder Ciudad Juarez had never been targeted by the military. When the article was published, it hit the US and Mexican governments like a thunderclap. The man leading the crackdown was on a cartel's payroll. DEA agent Walt, part of the operation, was stunned. He confronted Rebolo in Tijuana's command center. "You think this is wrong? You should understand better than anyone. Our governments don't want to fight this war, they just want to put on a show. I did what needed to be done to finish the job." Walt stormed off, walking away from the man he once trusted most. Soon after, Rebolo was arrested and imprisoned, and the operation was halted. The Felix family's eldest brother, once hunted into hiding, could now return home openly. Knowing his cover was blown, Amado decided it was time to retire. He told his accountant, Corral, to transfer $15 million a month into a secret account, without Hank's knowledge. He gave his ex-wife 2 bags of cash, then called his girlfriend in Brazil to tell her he had bought a beachside villa in Chile. He told her to go there first. He would join her after finishing business, but Amado didn't realize Hank had already caught on to his moves. Meanwhile, Sinaloa boss Palma ended up in government custody, where he coincidentally met El Chapo again. Once a flamboyant leader always surrounded by followers, Palma didn't know that El Chapo had changed, quietly groomed by Neto into a true leader. One day, while El Chapo was being briefed on Mayo's activities in Tijuana, Palma showed up. Out of respect for his old boss, El Chapo revealed his and Mayo's plans, but Palma objected to touching Tijuana, which El Chapo took as an insult. The next day, prison guards told El Chapo, "All your stuff is packed." After the guard left, Neto asked, "You're leaving?" "It's Palma." Neto nodded in approval. It seemed El Chapo had mastered the leadership lessons he'd been taught. Together, they watched Palma leave. Palma glared at him furiously. "You think you're the boss now? You'll always be just a member of Sinaloa. Sinaloa is mine. It's mine and Mayo's now." And just like that, the former boss was quietly pushed out. Neto stood by, amused at his misfortune. He joked that Palma would calm down soon anyway. After all, his new prison was by the seaside. Maybe he'd even send postcards. Then, unexpectedly, a guard walked up. "You too, Neto." Neto was stunned. Clearly, El Chapo had grown into a true leader, one who didn't need advisors constantly whispering in his ear. With one last shred of dignity, Neto told him, "I'll send you a picture." From that moment, El Chapo became the undisputed leader of the Sinaloa cartel, even from behind bars. Meanwhile, Mayo had just taken care of an enemy. After the army withdrew from Tijuana, the Felix family sought revenge. The younger Felix brother tracked down Mayo's hideout in Sinaloa and led a hit squad there. On the way, they were stopped by a police car. He flashed a badge, claiming they were headed to investigate a case, but the female officer ordered them out. As he turned, he spotted the male officer's shoes. He recognized them as Mayo's men. Both sides drew guns at the same time, and both shooters went down. When Enadina heard her brother had been killed, her hatred for Sinaloa deepened. The war between the two factions continues to this day. Now the largest cartel was Ciudad Juarez, led by Amado, and he was on the run, heading to a small airstrip to fly to Chile and reunite with his girlfriend. Amado found police already waiting at the plane. Gunfire erupted, his driver was killed, and the car crashed into a barricade. He fled on foot with a few loyal men while others provided cover. They dashed toward the plane, but just as it was ready to take off, the engine was hit. Amado abandoned the plane and escaped with backup, but leaving the country was no longer an option. That night, he called his girlfriend, telling her to go to Chile ahead of him. The next day, he visited a cosmetic surgery clinic in Mexico City. Alone in the room, he made a phone call. Soon after, local police got an anonymous tip. When they arrived, the doctor said Amado's surgery had failed. On July 7, 1997, Amado was reported dead from heart failure during surgery. His brother Vicente, who had been running the cartel in his absence, was arrested. All his planes were seized, and his girlfriend went to Chile alone. Hank, watching the news, breathed a sigh of relief. But the DEA didn't buy it. After the body was identified, it mysteriously vanished. The two surgeons who operated on him were found dead. The show's creators don't believe he died either, hinting at clues. For instance, in a Chilean beachfront villa, only Amado's girlfriend is seen on camera, yet there are 2 wine glasses and a toy airplane, the one Amado always carried. With Ciudad Juarez dismantled, Mayo visited El Chapo in prison. That border territory we've been looking for. I think we've found it, Ciudad Juarez. Without Amado, Vicente couldn't hold onto the prize. The future belongs to Sinaloa. Maybe you should think about it. My friend, I need you back. And that's the full story of all 3 seasons of Narcos, Mexico. This episode's question, out of all the major players, which character was your favorite? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching, see you next time.